Welcome to Garage Gym Athlete Cool Downs. These episodes are short, actionable podcasts pulled from previous interviews and content we've been publishing for the last several years. So go for a walk, hop on the rower, or clip into the bike for this cool down episode. Now, do you think that this is something to be said for overall joint health, and no matter what joint we're talking about, like more eccentric movement should be included in people's training?
I think in general, I think people avoid this type of movement because oftentimes people get what's called DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness, when you start doing an eccentric protocol. And so for the first, 24, 48 hours, you're pretty sore. And so people sort of avoid this type of movement. And I think traditionally people have associated this soreness with maybe damage. But the point is that you can do nothing. And after the 48 hours have passed, your muscle is just fine. So, there's no treatment necessary. Your muscle recovers. So that would indicate to us that there is no damage, and maybe it's a good sort of inflammatory response that's helping to build muscle or signaling to the body that look, we need to change a little bit because, this person's taking on a different type of strengthening program. Therefore, we need to build muscle here. So I think people avoid it generally, one, because there's a lot of literature to show that it's damaging. But this has been done in animal models where the muscle has been physiologically changed, so it's no longer clinically translatable, but it's been seeped into the clinic. And then the other thing I think is that people get delayed onset muscle soreness. But like I said, it's self-rectifying. And if it goes away and within 48 hours by itself, that's not damage that's happening there. So I think people kind of need to push through maybe that initial sort of soreness phase and stick with it, because I think you can get pretty good results from it. Aside from building muscle, we have some pretty promising data to show that after major sort of joint injuries and even just a simple ankle sprain, people are showing now that their brain changes, and the brain changes in the way that it tells you to sort of operate your lower extremity. And we're finding that if we give people eccentric exercise, it targets areas of the brain that are sort of changed after injury. So not only may you be doing your muscle a favor, but from a nervous system perspective, you may be giving yourself a very good sort of neural boost and sort of retraining the system that way, which we think is pretty cool as well.
That's very cool. And I will say, my first introduction to any sort of eccentric movement was back when I used to do bodybuilding style workouts, like chest and all that. And we would load up on the bench press, way more than I could lift. My buddy would, I would control the down. He would help me up. And you do get incredibly sore from that type of movement, but it is very beneficial, especially in the muscle growth world. And that's what I was going to ask, because we kind of got to the point that, okay, eccentric muscle contractions are going to help, but what's the real reason behind it? And you're saying muscle growth, and then also neuromuscular, coordination or activity is those are the two primary factors behind the eccentric muscle contractions helping?
Yeah, at the sort of most basic level, the word eccentric is it means odd. And the reason that eccentric exercise is named that way is for a very long time, we've understood how muscle works when it's shortening, but people have not understood how muscle works when it's lengthening. So the word eccentric is actually a word to describe that we don't even understand at sort of the most basic level, how muscle works. And what we found in the last couple of years, and this is pretty new scientific evidence, is that there's portions of muscle that are very springy. And when you lengthen the muscle, they get straightened out. It's called titin. It's a big protein. It's very springy. And when titin's involved and it's straightened out during an eccentric contraction, it opens up gateways that signal to the body to produce muscle, protein synthesis to produce more muscle that don't get opened up when you're shortening the muscle. So it's if you lengthen the muscle, it stretches out protein and it opens the muscle up and signals to the body, hey, I need some more muscle here. And so it's sort of a very unique way to build muscle that doesn't necessarily become available to you if you're just using shortening exercises all the time. And this is pretty sort of new evidence, but it explains a lot.
That's pretty fascinating. So yeah. Muscle lengthens, and then basically it's hey, it signals to the brain, we need more muscle over here from the proteins that are being generated. That's how the body picks up on it.
There's certainly signaling going to the brain to sort of maybe help to sort of neurally rewire it, but there's also signaling basically at like the biomarker level to say, look, there's a need to build more muscle here. So let's put more muscle in.
That's awesome. Okay, now how would you, and I want to talk a little bit more about the brain, but how would you recommend people get started with eccentric lifting?
Yeah, so the current recommendation is if people know what their 1 rep max is, basically you need to overload about 60% of your 1 rep max. We give people a pain scale of 0 to 10, 10 being like, please amputate. You know, you don't want to be working near a 10. You want to be probably working more on like the 5, 6 range in terms of intensity. You know, getting muscle soreness is one thing, but being able to differentiate between muscle soreness and like actual pain, that's sort of something that your listeners sort of need to be keyed into, right? If pain is coming from inside the joint itself, there's probably something going on with the way that you're lifting the weights, or that there's too much, or the speed is too intense, because you shouldn't really be having pain, you know, joint line pain. You should be having more like fatigue and muscle soreness and sort of those types of symptoms when you're doing eccentrics. Big key things, though, are making sure that you have whatever range of motion you're working through, that it's controlled, that the speed isn't overly intense. And those are some of the bigger parameters to when you start an eccentric protocol. And then once you sort of get comfortable, you can start more with a bigger overload, and that will continue to help sort of produce more gains. Okay.
And you think primarily through machine-based lifting would probably be the safest way to execute, or what do you think?
I think if you're a total novice, then maybe, because it has discrete endpoints where you can't like overextend a muscle or a joint with machines. So that's kind of nice. I think that, free weights are always nice because it's going to challenge the system a little bit more. So that's always a good route too, but maybe that's once you make sure that you have sort of the motion down.
Thanks for listening to today's Cool Down. If for some ridiculous reason you are not subscribed to Garage Gym Athlete programming, fix that problem right now. Go to garagegymathlete.com, sign up for a free trial, get started with us today. Thanks for listening.